What's up, everybody? Time for another episode of Mythic Conversations. If you're catching this on YouTube, thanks for checking the show out. Be sure to subscribe so you'll be notified whenever I post one of these. Usually I post these on Thursday mornings because I do the show actually live every Wednesday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on the Mythic Legions Cabal Facebook group. So if you're catching this on replay on the Facebook group, thank you again for checking it out. And of course, if you're one of the people who is now just signing on to join us live, or even if you're going to join live in a little while, because, obviously everyone has schedules, so you might not catch it right at the start, thank you very much for checking the show out. If you are joining a little bit late, you can always go back and check out the replay later. Michael, thank you very much for joining. Nice to have you here. Like every week, we're going to start kind of ease into it, give people a chance to jump on and, get themselves situated before we start the actual conversation. And, I get going, I do my introduction and everything. Amy, yes, as I said, I plan on doing it every single Wednesday unless something keeps me from it. Is nice to see you. Drew, nice to see you. Hello. Yeah, I didn't post earlier today specifically saying I was doing it, but I will promise you this. If I'm not going to do it, I guarantee you that I will announce that well in advance that I will not be here. So if you don't hear anything from me, you can assume that Mythic Conversations will be going on as planned. Leland, nice to have you here. Thank you very much for joining. Got a pretty cool conversation tonight that I want to have. This is actually episode 9 of the show. Wanted to talk a little bit tonight about creating series. If you've been following what I've been doing, it's this week on my Instagram and on Facebook. It's very relevant to what I've been doing, but we'll get into that in just a moment. So let's get started like I do every single week. Let me introduce the show. This is Mythic Conversations. My name is Jeremy Gerard. If you are tuning in for the first time and you don't know who I am, I'm a Mythic Legions collector and customizer. I also have the distinct privilege of working as the digital marketing manager for Four Horsemen Studios, where I get to put out all the content on sourcehorseman.com. If you want to check out more of my custom work, the information's right there, www.mythiccustoms.com. I post recipes and photos of all of my customs on my website, including everything we're going to be looking at tonight. You can check me out as well on Instagram at Mythic Customs. I post there daily, lots of new stuff. Every single week I post new things, as well as, rehashing some older stuff, some like 360 views of some older stuff, so you can get a really good look at those as well. And of course, every Wednesday night, I'm here doing Mythic Conversations, the show where we talk about what's going on in Mythic Legions news. I talk a bit about customizing because that is the angle that I come at Mythic Legions from. And because it is a conversation and it is a live show during this initial broadcast, I'm happy to answer questions, happy to have a conversation and talk a little bit about what you want to talk about. So, as I said a few minutes ago before my intro, tonight the topic of conversation, I want to talk about creating a series. If you've been following what I've been doing this week on my Instagram page, and I've, of course, been reposting them on the Cabal, I've been posting a series called The Ghosts of Karamor. And this was a fun experiment that I had that I thought would make for some interesting posts. And I thought it would make for an interesting topic tonight about thinking beyond just creating a single custom, but really tackling it more like a project and creating a larger group of characters that are meant to go together and meant to be displayed together. Before we get into that, let's check what people are commenting on and talk a little bit about what little news there may be. No other comments, but thank you, Byron, Timothy, Chris, and everyone that's joined. Thank you so much. So if you didn't check it out earlier today, if you're not following the Four Horsemen's Instagram account, you absolutely should be. They post really cool stuff there, and especially now where everyone's in quarantine because of COVID-19, they're still working. They're just working remotely, and they're doing their best to keep showing some progress. So they're showing some really cool stuff over the last few weeks. They've shown a couple cool renders. They showed some shoulder armor. I believe, I don't know if it was last week they showed the shoulder armor or the week before. I know last week they showed some like moose antler attachments. And then today they showed a really, really cool hammer that's got like two, I'm not sure if it's ram heads on each side, but it's definitely, I think it's wildebeest actually. But it's two beast heads on the sides of a hammer. Super cool. It's a project that they worked on with Nate Barch. I did actually see all this stuff when I was at the studio, so I'm super excited that they're starting to show everybody some of their stuff. Everyone is still curious what scale these things are for. Hopefully they'll reveal that soon so we can talk more about it, but it is looking awesome. So again, if you're not following their Instagram, what is wrong with you? You should definitely be doing so. Really cool stuff there, including some of those little renders they've shown. That's a little bit of a teaser of something forthcoming. So, again, not much else going on. Like I said, it's kind of quiet time right now. Like most companies, things are in a bit of flux because of COVID-19. So we're all just waiting for, to get information about what, what's going to be forthcoming, what impact timelines for the existing stuff. I mean, one good piece of news on that front is it seems like China is kind of gotten past the worst of this. I was reading today there were no new cases that have been detected in China for a week or something. So a lot of the factory areas are opening back up for business. So specifically from a toy production standpoint, that might actually be, light at the end of the tunnel there. So good to see that. I mean, good to see just any good news and progress like that at a time like this, right? But in the meantime, we're hanging out, staying home, and staying safe. Anthony, nice to see you here. Anthony and family. David, thank you for joining as well. And actually, it's funny. So Anthony, you're on, and part of the inspiration for tonight's topic, talking about series of figures, was partially inspired by the post that I'm doing this week, and I thought it'd be an interesting topic. But also, Anthony had posted something the other day in the Cabal, kind of a conversation starter, where he had asked, what would be your ideal team, like Mythic Legions figure team, non-customs, so existing figures that you would put together. And I thought it was a really cool question to ask, and it's right in line with what I want to talk about tonight. And what that is, when you create customs and you sit down and you think about how you're going to design this character, what parts you're going to use or what you're going for, maybe you sit down and you decide that you want to create a vampire hunter. I think this would be really cool. I got a bunch of vampires. It makes sense to have a vampire hunter. Okay, logical leap you can make there. I've seen a number of people do those. When I did that, I created a team of vampire hunters, because one of the things I love to do with these customs is to think beyond just a single piece. I mean, you can see the displays behind me. Obviously, the way that I display these toys is very important to me. I want them to have that display quality. So I like to think when I'm creating these customs, what am I going to display them with? And sometimes they're going to be displayed with existing figures. I mean, just the figures themselves lend themselves to being displayed in groups because they have certain races. And I know some people, that's one of the great things about Mythic Legions is, you can decide how you want to display them, how you want the lore to work for you. So, I mean, take the dwarves, for instance. Dwarves are hugely popular. But if you actually look at the real bios of the dwarves, there's just as many good dwarves as there are bad ones. I know a lot of people think about dwarves and they imagine like Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit-style dwarves, where they're a heroic race. But in Mythic Legions lore, you've got your Thord Ironjaw and your, the other one, Joran Runeshaper. You have these characters that are heroic characters, but you also have your Balthar Shadowhorn and King Brom the Mayanjaw. I mean, when I saw King Bromden for the first time, the renders of him in the Kickstarter, I thought, oh, this is great. I got a Dwarven King. And then when the bio came out, I realized that the bio they created for him was that he was evil. I was actually pretty surprised. Now, I don't use Bromden as an evil character. I put all my dwarves together. And that's one of the cool things, like I said, is you could display these based on the approved factions, the actual factions they put forward, and put all the Legion of Erethyr together and all of the, Army of Laodiceus. Or you can mix and match. And that's how I do it. So I have a whole display case just of dwarves. I have a display case of goblins. I mean, right now all the goblins are from the same faction, so that kind of works. But just because of the way they are doing these figures, they lend themselves to being displayed in groupings anyway. So sometimes if I'm doing, say, a custom dwarf, I already know that I'm going to display it with my existing dwarves, with the other characters, and that's fine. But other times when I'm creating these characters, I like to think, do I just want to pop this in an existing display, or do I want to do something new? Do I want to create a completely new display just to put these characters? When you're starting to do customs, the process of creating a series, I think, provides a really interesting challenge. So especially if you've been customizing for a little while and maybe you're not getting bored with it, but if you're looking for another challenge you want to tackle, think beyond a single character. Think about a series and what you could do for that. I'm going to give you hopefully some inspiration to get you inspired tonight. I'm going to show some of the series that I've done. I'm going to talk you through some of my thought process and why I did things the way I did. And I'm just going to give you some kind of springboards that hopefully you can use to do some series of your own. Let's see. Anthony's saying, yay, he contributed to the show. He absolutely did. So the ways that I think that you can create some series of characters, I already mentioned one. Just follow the existing races they already have. So if you're really into dwarves or you're really into orcs or goblins, you can create a little display of custom figures just around that race. What I would suggest is if you're going to do that, think beyond them. They're just warriors. Don't just slap some random weapons and pieces on them and say, there you go. Nothing wrong with that if that's what you want to do, but if you want to elevate, if you want to talk, go beyond just that part of the process, think about a couple ways that you could change that group up. Because one of the nice things is variety. When you have a display that has some cool variety in it, that really makes for a much more unique type look. Now, there's nothing wrong with Legion building. If you want to get a whole bunch of Goblin Legion builders and slap all of those armored heads on them and display them all together, or do the same thing with orcs, there's something to be said for just having a cool army of characters like that. But I personally, you could say I army build because of how much I have, but I try not to have a lot of all the exact same look. I don't have a lot of all the same kind of orc. Because space is limited, I like to have variety. So if you're going to do that with a race, what I would suggest is think about the different kinds of characters that you could have in that little party. Maybe one is a fighter and one is a mage and one is, an archer. You can do that all within the same race. And that's actually a lot of fun when you just take one race and you start pushing at the edges. If you look at I'll continue using the goblins. Every goblin that's come out so far has kind of been a warrior sort. Thwick was an archer, but everyone else has kind of been a warrior, maybe with the exception of Noglin, the king. So starting to introduce some additional races and kinds of classes, that I think is a lot of fun. And obviously this harkens a lot to the whole Dungeons and Dragons mentality, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But the different kinds of characters that you could imagine there being in the realm of mythos, that's something you can do within these different races. Or you can give them like a theme. Like if you're going to make an orc raiding party, then that right there, even though they're probably all going to be like warrior type, barbarian, ravager type characters, because you've got a theme there, that's really kind of cool. It's similar actually to what the Horsemen did in the Colosseum wave. So the Colosseum wave was a great example. I mean, look, it's one of the most popular, sought after waves out there right now. Someone just posted this the other day, and they were looking for Colosseum figures, and I looked at the lineup, and I hadn't looked at the lineup for Colosseum in some time, but looking at that lineup and seeing who was actually in that, I mean, obviously the Adamon and the Keltis figures, the Motu tributes, those are popular and expensive, but Halmare Golden Tooth and the Black Knight Legion Builder, the Colosseum Orc Legion Builder, all of those figures, I was like, Romulus, wow, really, really expensive figures these days. And it's cool because that wave was incredibly diverse. You know, we had a dwarf, we had an orc, a barbarian, we had a skeleton, we had a knight, we had the Spartan-y looking warrior, and then of course we had the arena troll, Brontus, the Cyclops. Lot of variety, but they all had a central theme that tied them together, and that was Colosseum. The fact that they were Colosseum-style warriors. You can do something similar with that. If you're going to make a group of characters, whether they're all the same race or different, think about a theme. What ties them together? What has brought those characters together? I mean, Colosseum, again, is one of them. We're going to look at some examples tonight of other kinds of themes that you can do to bring different races in and tie them in like that. Another thing you can do, and this is the idea that I got from Anthony, is you can take that Dungeons & Dragons style approach. So those of you who maybe have never played Dungeons & Dragons, there's a couple ways when you're starting out your party. You know, you've got you and a group of friends, and you're going to create some characters, and you're going to go out as adventurers. And most of the time, what you want to do is you want to create a party that is well balanced. So you don't want a party that is all a similar type of character. You don't want a party that is all like muscle-bound, sword-wielding barbarians, because you're going to be incredibly heavy in one skill area, but incredibly light in others. Now, actually, if you have an experienced party, that's actually a really fun thing to do, to create a party that is super heavy in one skill set, but can't do the other things, because from a strategy standpoint, and if you have a great dungeon master, it forces that party to, you know, use their strengths in ways that compensate for their weaknesses. You know, if you've got a group full of barbarians and you've got to be stealthy and sneak into some place, probably not going to work. So do you, instead of sneaking, just burst through and just hack and slash and try to, you know, leverage the strength you do have, your physical strength, your combat prowess, to compensate for the lack of other skills you have? That's certainly a way you could play, but traditionally, especially when you're starting out, your newer players or whatever that aren't as advanced, that don't want that kind of a challenge, you want to have a party that's well balanced. So you do want to have like a tank-like character, someone that's going to take a lot of damage and dish out a lot of damage. But then you also want someone that is stealthy, like a rogue thief type character. You want someone that's a healer. You want a cleric that is going to be able to repair some damage to the players. You know, a magic user, someone that's got wisdom and can cast some powerful spells down the road. Some just traditional fighters. You want to have this mix of characters. That same mentality you can really, really do with your customs. So create a Dungeons & Dragons party. And this is what Anthony was talking about, like what, and he wasn't talking customs, he was just talking the standard figures, but he was like, if you were going to put together a party of, say, 5 or 6 characters from existing Mythic Legions figures, and you want to have that diversity, you want to have those skill sets, what characters would you use? And it's a cool question just to ponder, just to look at the existing figures you have, and you might even just put a display together with those existing figures. But from a customizing standpoint, if you're going to create a series, that's certainly one way you can do it. You know, create a dwarf and add. I said a big tank. Use one of the ogre scale figures. You know, and actually, if you're following, I talked earlier about following Four Horsemen Studios on Instagram. You should also be following Trevor Williams 1/6 Shooter. Amazing work. He reposts them here in the Cabal, but you can see him on his Instagram as well. And he posted one today. And actually, by the way, if the ones he posts in the Cabal are the Mythic Legions ones he does. He does a ton of great photography. Check him out on Instagram. You get to see them all. But he posted a great photo today. And it wasn't customs, but it was a super, just a great composition. It was like Bothar lifting the lid off a big treasure chest, like a big stone treasure chest, and there was an elf. It was an elf ranger figure, it looked like, but I think it had one of the custom robes from C. Jessam in it. It looked more like a mage, actually. And then I believe Torgon Redfin was in there and Cassia was in there. Nice little party of characters. And it's exactly what I'm talking about, having diversity in the way the characters look and things like that. That's certainly something you can do where you can just put together like a diverse group of looking and character trait type customs to have for a display. That's one suggestion. Let me grab a quick drink. Now, another thing that you can do is you can think about which figure do you either have a bunch of or extras of or is super readily available. And this is one of the things I'm going to show right now. So I purchase lots of figures all the time because I'm constantly having to replace my fodder bins to continue doing all this. I bought a few lots in a row, and I actually ended up with a handful of this figure, the Talon Frostbow, which is a beautiful figure. And it does come with a second head, like the elven helmet head, so you can kind of Legion build it. But she's so distinct that I didn't want to have, I clearly didn't want to use other figures with her normal head, and even other figures with the helmeted head. It looked a little too much like another Talon Frostbow to me. So I thought to myself, what can I do excuse me, to build a series around this character to create other Frost Elves, because she's the first Frost Elf we've gotten. Now, presumably we'll get more, but I didn't want to wait. I wanted to add some Frost Elves to my shelf right away. And this is something you can super easily do if you've got extras of these, or she's still available online, so you can certainly buy some. So what I did here was I created a male Frost Elf, and this is 90% Talon Frostbow. I mentioned she came with that builder style head. That is the head that is on this figure. It is all the exact same body parts here. All I did replace, I didn't use the fur cape. I used this is just some blue cloth fabric I have that's just, underneath. I put a couple little holes in it so I could peg the shoulder pauldrons through it. But all I did with this to create this male Frost Elf was I actually used a torso from one of the skeleton soldier figures, the 2.0 style. So that's the skeleton figure that comes with the two different torsos, so you can display it as male or female. So if you have one of those, you have an extra torso, either a male or a female. So for the one that I displayed as female, I had an extra male torso. So I wanted to use that for this configuration, and it was super easy to do. This is the paint I used. This is a Craft Smart paint, and the color is pewter. I don't know if that's going to focus, but the color, I'm telling you right now, it's Craft Smart. I got this at Michael's, and the color is actually called pewter. In my Michael's, in the Craft Smart section, they have a bunch of metallics. This was with those metallics there. This color is actually a really good base to use to match the colors that you have on the Talon Frostbow. So all that I did, and this builds on some of the lessons I've talked about in previous weeks, was I took that base body, right? I believe I sprayed it in black first. So I gave it a nice base coat, but then I went over with that, and I didn't dry brush it. I actually put it on as a nice thick coat. Might have taken 2 coats because I didn't want to slop it on. So I still tried to do a thinner coat. So I took like 2 coats to really get the coverage I wanted. But then I had a nice flat color. Then what I did was I used another Craft Smart color, and it's just called tin, T-I-N. I used a little tin and Silverworks as well, but then I did a little dry brushing with that, because if you look at the armor on the Talon Frostbow, and again, remember I said last week, when you start looking at these figures, look at them from the perspective of how did they create that paint? How did they get that effect? Because when you start looking at it from that perspective, I think what you're going to start seeing, especially when you get experience, is, oh, I see how they did that. That's a base color of this, and that's a little silver dry brushing. And that's what the Talon Frostbow is. So once you have that base color, if you just do some really subtle silver or tin dry brushing on top, you get that metallic-y sheen that you see on the armor here. And then I took that same silver color, and instead of dry brushing it, I actually applied it to like some of the details that are on the front of the armor right there. Now, the last part I could have done, I haven't done it to this one yet, is if you look at the Talon Frostbow, the actual body armor and the legs, all of the straps are like a light brownish leather. I didn't paint those straps here. It's something I plan on doing down the road. I haven't gotten around to it. But to be honest with you, if you don't want to go, because that is going to be a little bit harder to do. They're very small pieces. You're going to need a finer brush for that. But even without that, this is a super, super easy customization. Spray paint it black. Use this Craft Smart pewter to get you that base color, and then do a little silver dry brushing or tin dry brushing. Either one will work to get that kind of sheen. Very, very simple. And just like that, you've got yourself a male Frost Elf. Now, I also did another one of these, same exact process, but instead of using this chest plate, I used the chest plates from a Steel Knight Legion builder. Another figure that is readily available still. That gave me two, exact same thing I did there, but different chest plate. So I actually had two male Frost Elves that look slightly different. So now I'm starting to build a bit of a series. I'm starting to build a little team here that I can display together. I've got Talon Frostbow as my main character there. I've got a couple male Frost Elves behind her. And I also did this one here. So this is the king of the Frost Elf characters that I kind of made. And this one was definitely some more work, but it started with like I just said, a Steel Knight Legion builder. I used that same process, but instead of basing it out in black first, I just did a little bit of that pewter color right on top of the silver, and then a little bit of dry brushing over it to give, instead of a full coverage, just to give some of the design elements within the armor that same color here. I used this little back fur piece that came with a Freya figure. Again, another piece of blue cloth. And the head here is actually from a Lord Adon. I had to lighten the skin. I painted the hair white, and I removed the crown piece, and instead I used a crown piece that originally came with an Artemis silver cord. But it gives it a very different look, and it now gives me a new character to put with my Frost Elves. Even cooler, when you do this, if you follow this pattern here, like I said, I didn't want to use that fur piece that Talon comes with on my male Frost Elves, so I had that extra. I also didn't want to use the axe she comes with on any of them, because that axe always seemed weird to be with an elf, like with the elfish weapons. I always imagine that more of like a fighter or a barbarian or a dwarf. So I showed this last week, but this Frost Dwarf that I did, that I display with my Frost Elves, all this is a silver dwarf. This loin piece here, it was in my fodder, but I think it's actually from a Calavius. But honestly, any loin piece would work here. But all I did was add a little bit of highlights, and all of these highlights that I painted on the figure, on the silver dwarf, to give them some extra detail, all of those were painted with this, the exact same pewter color. So it matches really, really well. I did swap out his horn attachments for some antlers, but I gave him that extra fur piece that I had from the Talon, and I gave him the axe. And just like that, you start getting these characters that look really, really well together. And again, the whole way this started was by looking at my fodder piles, by looking at the figures I have, or if you don't have piles of fodder, looking at online stores and seeing what's available, or eBay auctions and seeing what's available. One of the ways that you can start thinking about how am I going to create a series is by saying, what figures do I have available? That's certainly a way to start. And ironically, it's how I started the series that I've been posting all this week. So all this week, I mentioned I've been posting these figures that I call the Ghosts of Karamor. This is the one I posted on Monday, the king of that group, which these are very much, a couple people when I posted him, they said it reminded him of the King of the Dead from Lord of the Rings. That's absolutely what these were inspired by, specifically because this head looks very much like that King of the Dead from Lord of the Rings. The scene where Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli go under the mountain and they call upon an old vow that this army had made to fight alongside this king. And the story goes that when it came time to fight, they abandoned their vow, and they did, and they were cursed. And they've been cursed to live under the mountain forever until they can fulfill their vow. So being from that bloodline, Aragorn calls it in their favor and says, fight for me and I'll release you from this curse. And that's what they want. They want to be released from the curse. But when I was creating my characters, my Ghosts of Karamor, the story I wrote was, what if they didn't want to be released from it? What if they were traitors who refused to honor their alliances, and when they were finally cursed by their enemies, rather than it actually being a bad thing, being a curse, they were delighted in it. They delighted in this newfound immortality that they now had. So these were very much evil characters. And the way that I started them was I got a whole bunch of Scaphoid figures. So the green bone skeleton Scaphoid, I bought a lot of figures a few months ago, and it had like 6 of them in it, or 4 of them in it, or something. And I already had a few in my collection. I had a few in my fodder bins. Dennis just sent me a pair of green bones to use. Long story short, I ended up with a whole bunch of green bones, and I thought it would be a really fun exercise to see how many unique characters I could make based off the same base figure, in this case, Scaphoid. Now, obviously, I'm aware that Scaphoid is not an easy-to-find figure these days. I happen to get lucky. I had a bunch of them, and I thought it would be a fun exercise to do. And that's whether you're basing your custom series off something that is readily available, that you're going to buy 5 or 6 of them right now from Big Bad Toy Store or something, or whether it happens to be a bunch that you just have on hand like I have with the Scaphoid figures. Either way, that's something that you can use as a springboard to create your series. I'm going to check comments real quick. Joe, Josh, Jay, thanks for joining us. Mike, thank you for joining. And Brian. Jay saying, seems like you missed a lot. No worries, man. You can always go back and check out the replay, see what you missed. Luis, thank you for joining. So I was just talking about the series, and I posted a few of them so far. This was one I posted yesterday that uses the Keltis style head. I always loved that head because I don't use any of the Motu tribute figures as Motu tribute figures. I have a display of Motu figures over there. So as cool as they are, I think they look really, really cool. I don't tend to display them that way. I think I have Kauros and Purplor that are actually out, but they both have the My Action Figure Customs battle masks on, so they are even a little different there. But none of the others from that line do I have on display as Motu characters. Maybe the Trapjaw, because I did my custom Trapjaw version, so he's still out. But I always loved the Keltis head. I didn't want to use it with the blue bones. I used the blue bones to make an ice skeleton. But this head, I liked the yellow on the face and the green around the edges is actually really close to the Scaphoid bones already. And the purple on, around his head, that's like an old scapular head, so that purple around the head there, that matches perfectly the torso piece and the loin piece of Scaphoid. So I loved adding those pieces together, and this was a character that I really enjoyed making. And then I did one today as well, and this whole exercise of making this series was just trying to create a group of characters that all worked well together. I gave them a central storyline. They're all this cursed army, basically. So I wanted them all to look different, and I gave them different personalities. The one I posted today, I referred to him as being like a smuggler and a mercenary. And it's a Mandibulus head. I just repainted the face of Mandibulus and then slapped on some different, some weapons, some Lord of the Ring weapons, some, different capes and like skirt type pieces. And this is what I did for all of them. I did 12. When all was said and done, I did 12 of these Ghosts of Karamor. 6 for myself and 6 that I'm actually going to be offering for sale this week, which we'll talk about in a little while. But the lesson here is this is one of the ways that you can start thinking about creating a series, is look at a figure that you have readily available or you can easily get and think about how you would build off of that. Use Legion builders. I mean, there's a bunch of Legion builders that are still available. You can certainly do some really cool stuff just by using those as your base figures and mixing in some different heads, mixing in some different pieces from other toy lines. Following a lot of the steps that I've covered in previous weeks, you can do some really cool stuff just by using that method and make a really cool series. So let's see what we got going on here. So another thing that you can do, Jay's saying he's excited. I'm showing the Ghoulie figures. He wants to show me a few of his ideas. Lee's saying, just made it, Jeremy. It's getting weird over here in Australia. I appreciate the normality of your segment. You're very welcome, Lee. Stay safe over there in Australia. So another thing that you can do, and one of the ways I tend to make a lot of series is to really have a theme around them. So I had mentioned vampires and vampire hunters, and I said when I did that, I made a group of them. So all of them fell under that theme of vampire hunters. Then, so the first thing I said is, okay, well, what do I want them to look like? And I, also building off that concept of things that are readily available, I happened to have a couple Carpathia figures at the time, and it was super easy for me to get other vampires type figures, whether it's the Lucretia figure, whether it was the Vampire Knight. There was a bunch of these figures that were pretty readily available that I knew I could use. So I liked the idea, excuse me, of my vampire hunters actually looking kind of like the vampires. The same color armor, the same blacks and purples. That's what I wanted to do. That was the direction I decided to go from a design standpoint. And then what I had a lot of fun with was saying, okay, well, let me diversify the group. So I ended up doing 5 of them. So I said I wanted to have, a human fighter character as my leader. I wanted to have the second in command be a dwarf, really stout-looking dwarf. I wanted there to be, a sleeker character, so I did an elf swordsman. I wanted to have a female in there, so I did a female archer. And then finally, I did a human mage, like an old human mage. So I had a couple different races. I had humans, elves, and dwarves. I had males and females. I had young and old. I covered a lot of different ground, and when you looked at that whole group, and I do have some group photos, like every week when we're done this, I will post photos of everything we looked at tonight, better photos, and I'll post a group shot of the vampire hunters. But I've got a couple of them here that we can look at as well. And that first one I did, and again, this uses the Carpathius body, but it uses a wonderful, wonderful head from Matt O'Toole at Castle of Power. And I just went through my fodder bins. This axe here is actually from a Marvel Legends. It's the Carl Urban figure from Thor Ragnarok. I can't think of his name. I'm sure someone's going to tell me right now. I can't think of his name, but it's from a Marvel Legends figure. A couple swords that I had in my fodder bins. I even gave him this, because remember, he's fighting vampires. I gave him this cool like cross crucifix that's actually from a Buffy the Vampire Slayer figure. This is how I started, by putting this character together, cool vampire hunter, and then I'm thinking what other characters will work with him. This actual set was really heavy. I had just gotten a bunch of heads from Matt O'Toole, so this dwarf ended up having that same head. Now, for this body, this was one where I didn't have a black and purple body to use in the dwarf scale, so I used a King Bromden Ironjaw, which is already black and gold, but what I did was all of the red parts, I just painted purple to match the other figures, and was able to come up with this character here. And I gave him this cool Templar axe that I got from my Action Figure Customs, and this other piece here is actually a weapon I made using one of the ball pieces from a Hagnon figure with a different handle and chain. But when you start putting these together, like this little group starts looking really, really cool. You start getting these characters that when you display them as a team, they start looking really, really cool together. And when you put them on a shelf, that's what's really cool. You got some vampires in front, and then you maybe have the vampire hunters aligned behind them. They start looking really, really cool. This is the female I did for that, where I used a Lucretia body. And actually, I've talked before about using Marvel Legends heads. I tend to find them to be a little small. This was one that came from a silk figure, which was not a cheap figure. I ended up buying the silk figure just to use this head on this custom. I painted her mask purple to match the rest of the figure here. Gave her some soft goods, some cool weapons. Again, another sword from Action Figure Customs. This crossbow actually came from a Spawn Dark Ages figure. But you start putting those together and you get some cool variety. And what ties them together is their mission, their theme. They're all vampire hunters. That's something that I think that's my favorite way to create series, is to really think about, okay, I want to create a kind of figure, but I want to have a bunch of different races represented. And that goes to the designer in me. Like I'm actually fascinated by people that can take like one subject and have lots of different versions of it. So I'll give you an example. I remember seeing an art exhibit it might have actually been at San Diego Comic-Con a number of years ago. If not, maybe it was at Celebration or Star Wars Celebration or something. But basically what they did was they took a whole bunch of like full-size Darth Vader helmets and they gave it to a whole bunch of different artists. And they said, make art. Just do something with it. And to see how they all started with that base element they had to use, the Darth Vader helmet, to see the incredible variety of designs they came up with, I find stuff like that fascinating. To have one common element or one common theme that everyone has to play off of, to see how different artists will interpret that, what they will do within that restriction, basically. That's kind of the way that I looked at this series and how I look at a lot of series, is you get a theme. This group is tied together by something, but how are they going to be unique? How am I going to create unique characters within that specific theme? Again, from a customizing standpoint, it's a challenge, and that's fun. It gives you something to work on beyond just one figure. And I'm telling you that when you're done that series and you get to put it on display as a little group, they are so much cooler. As cool as they are individually, they multiply their coolness by being all together as one. Okay. As I've said before, this is a conversation. So if you do have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat here. I routinely will go through the comments to see what people are talking about, and I'm always happy to answer questions. David Hunter answered the question earlier. He said Scourge. I think his name's actually Scourge. When I said I can't remember the Carl Urban character that axe came from, yeah, I believe his name is Scourge. That seems familiar. That rings a ring a bell. So the last series that I'm going to look at tonight, probably one of my most popular in terms of people liking it, and certainly one of my favorites was the Samurais that I did. And I've shown these if you've been following previous weeks, or if you've gone back and watched some of them. You're going to start to see some of the same customs because a lot of principles go into these different things. So there may be a week where I'm talking about dry brushing that I bring out a character. I may bring out that same character in subsequent weeks to talk about a different topic or a different lesson that I want to convey, because none of these customs have only one technique that goes into them or one aspect that I think is worth talking about. So you'll definitely start to see some repeat pieces. I know that I've shown Samurais previously, but that was one of the lines, one of the series that I worked on that I personally found the most fulfilling. And it's interesting, too, because it started with the Mulan figure that I did, which was part of a different series. So and I've talked about this before, but please indulge me, when I first got Mythic Legions 2.0, when we got the thinner figures, the female figures, one of the projects I set myself off on was creating Mythic Legions versions of characters that were inspired by some of the Disney princesses. And I was in turn inspired to do that by some artwork I had seen that had reimagined a bunch of the Disney princesses as warriors. I thought it was a cool idea, and I was looking at these characters and said, hey, that's a fun design challenge, let me tackle that. And one of the figures I did at the time was my version of Mulan, which I used an Artemis silver cord head with some different body parts. I removed her normal crown piece, and I actually replaced it with the one from Lord Adon. I liked the way that looked. I was a smaller profile, looked more samurai-like to me. And I used the key piece there was I used some armor that came off an Articulated Icons samurai figure. So Articulated Icons was a toy line that was sold through a Kickstarter originally, but it was done by the Fwoosh. If you're familiar with the Fwoosh.com, that is a website for action figures and toy collecting. They put out a series of figures a number of years ago now, some samurai figures, a little bit smaller scale than Mythic Legions, but you can get the armor off and you can actually pop it onto some Mythic Legions 2.0 bodies. It was a while ago, it might have been like episode 2 or 3 that I talked about this, but I actually did one live on the air. Oop, we have one drawn. I actually did a custom configuration where I was talking about boiling and popping parts and stuff, and I actually put some armor from a Articulated Icon Samurai onto a figure on one of the shows. So there's a previous show where I talk about that more and actually demonstrate it. But just that configuration, it got the juices flowing. As soon as I did the Mulan, I started thinking, I wonder who else I could do this to. And ironically, I ended up doing it with the Vampire Hunters. The elf figure that I did for the Vampire Hunters, I ended up using the samurai armor on because I wanted to make them like a swordsman, and I thought that looked really cool. And having done that for a few different figures, it started to get me thinking, well, what other kinds of characters could I use this armor for? And then I created my whole Mythic Shoguns series. And it started as just a few, and it just kept springboarding, and I'm still building new ones. I still continue to add new samurais to the display because it's a theme that I'm really very much enjoying. But the way it started was saying, okay, I know that I can get the samurai armor onto 2.0 bodies, so what kinds of races can I reimagine as a samurai? And one of the first ones I did here was this Samurai Goblin, which is a Thwick figure. This is a super, super easy custom recipe to do. It honestly just uses a Thwick figure. So all I did was replace the curled horns, the red horns that Thwick comes with these antlers, because I like the idea of having that. I've seen old like Japanese samurai helmets that have like antlers on them, so I like that style. But all I did is this samurai armor that he's wearing and this bat piece, that just comes from a Articulated Icons. The figure's name is Fumetsu, the like Undying Ronin, I think is what I call him, but his name is Fumetsu. And I really like that. And even that crest on his head comes from the same figure. And I've made a few of these. I've sold a few of these as well. This one's mine. There have been some times where I've actually drilled, because these crests on the heads, they're made to peg into the helmets on the Articulated Icon Samurais. They have a little peg behind them. So there have been a few times where I've actually drilled a hole in the Mythic Legions figure's head, which is a little nerve-wracking, and then I've glued that peg right in. That works really, really well. Other times, another thing you can do is if you just slice the back of the peg off on the crest to make it flat, then you can just glue that right onto the head. So either one works. I've done it both ways. I don't know why I did it. I know the first ones I did, I drilled. I think the last ones I did, I was down here. I didn't feel like going to get the drill. But super easy figure, and I really, really like the way it looks as this cool kind of samurai archer. I have actually that quiver comes with the samurai figures as well, but I combine that with the bow. So all of the quivers in Mythic Legions, I mean, they're like the elf quivers. I don't imagine a goblin having that style quiver. It looks a little too fancy. So I like this plainer one better, and then the crossbow on his back there. Really cool figure. The sword comes from a Thwick. So it's really just combining two figures with those antlers. And again, it's asking the question, okay, what would this race look like in this theme? Ultimately, that is a great way to create some cool series and some cool variety. How would a skeleton look as a samurai? So this is one that combines. This silver armor was from a figure, again, Articulated Icons, called the Temple Guardian. I combined that with a 2.0 skeleton soldier figure, and I actually used one of the adapters on his back here. I cut a hole actually in the back of the armor so I could peg that through, so I could give this two sets of arms. So I could actually have this cool four-armed skeleton. He's holding two swords in his hands. He's holding this bat, and then he's holding this kind of spear here. And for the head, what I actually did was these helmets, they actually have a little peg inside of them. The Articulated Icons figures, the heads for the figures themselves have a little hole in back, and these just peg right in. So I just replicated that. I drilled a tiny little hole in the back of the skeleton's head, and this helmet now just pegs right on and off. And look, it's super solid. I'm holding it upside down. It's not falling off. But if I want to pull it off, I can do so super, super easy. So that's a cool little combination there. And again, it was just me thinking, what would that look like? Now, you're not going to see it on camera, but I also did go beyond just slapping the armor on this one. The goblin I showed, I didn't actually do any paint on that. This figure has zero paint on it. There's no paint. If you're worried, I'm not really comfortable painting, this is just a simple pop and swap. This one, not so much. This one I did because I wanted, he's a skeleton, I wanted the armor to look dirty and dingy, and I added that. Wear, some brown, some dry brushing, some brown dry brushing to really dirty him up. I even dirtied up the weapons. The swords are all dirtied and stuff, so I really wanted to have that effect. I even added some extra dirt to the bones and stuff. But again, the theme here, the approach to creating this is nothing more than how would this race look in this theme? And then when you start building out the different kinds of characters, so in my samurais, I ended up doing a goblin and a skeleton that you see here. I did a Shadow Elf. I'm literally looking, as I'm saying this, I'm looking at them. I did a Shadow Elf. I did the original elf, the Mulan one I mentioned. I did a second elf that was a Lord Adon that I wanted to make more as like a mentor. I did a dwarf. I've done a warrior figure. I've done a vampire. A whole bunch of them. I used a Grisha, the Slitherer figure. I used that as a base, and I ended up putting an elf head on it to create kind of like a warlord character. A lot of variety that I've been able to do. I even did this one here. Now, obviously, this one does not use the samurai armor from a Articulated Icons. This is an ogre scale figure, so this had to use much larger weapons and much larger armor. But this uses some pieces that were actually made for 12-inch scale figures, 1/6 scale figures. And I'm going to do a whole show in a few weeks all around different accessories that you can use to further outfit your ogres that come from 12-inch lines. But this is a really cool example, and that wonderful head sculpt is another piece from Matt O'Toole at Castle of Power. But again, all same process. What would X race look like under this certain kind of theme? You don't have to do a big set. You don't have to do 10 figures or 6 figures. Do 3. Just do 3 and think about what would this little trio of adventurers look like? Or what would this trio of vampire hunters, samurais, barbarian raiders, you can have so much fun just by doing that and create so much cool variety. Let me check out some comments here. Yeah, so Chris is pointing out, just so everyone knows, Articulated Icons are still available for between $20 to $30 on the website. It's cool figures and still a current line. Yeah, absolutely. The samurai style figures came out a number of years ago. There's 4 of them. They're all still available. Again, I did a whole show where I covered this in a lot more detail. I actually showed all of them. So I won't rehash all of that, but they are still available. You can go to thefoosh.com, click on the Articulated Icons link, and they do still have a bunch of them. Chris is saying great use for the samurai armor. Yeah, I mean, they put them on sale. Actually, there was a while ago they were on sale for like $20. And I already had a bunch of them. I originally bought all of the samurais when they were like $52 each. So them being $20 to $30 is a steal, absolute steal. I ended up buying a bunch of them specifically to do customs like this. Mike's saying, I love the forearm application. Yeah, it's funny. I talked about this recently. When I wrote an article about wing adapters for Source Horseman a month ago, and I showed a picture of not this figure, but of this skeleton, not a samurai version, but the skeleton where I did exactly this, where I pegged the arms in the back. And the amount of people that didn't know that was a possibility. I thought it was fairly common knowledge. I forget sometimes that there's so many new fans coming into this line that they tend to not know everything that has been revealed in the past. There's simple stuff that I remember being shown when Advent of Decay first came out, people showed that, but it's not common knowledge if you're newer to the line. One thing that I know that not a lot of people know is with the Brother Mandibulus figure. So this uses the Brother Mandibulus head, and he comes with his mouth open. I don't know, a lot of people, they don't know that mouth actually closes. So he comes looking more like that with the mouth wide open. But that jaw is totally articulated. And I know that I still routinely will find people that aren't aware of the fact that you can totally close that jaw and get a very, very different look on that head. Or you can, pop the visor down and get a look. It's a great head. There's so many display options just with that one head. But yeah, I love the forearmed application. You can do some really fun stuff with that, with those back adapters. Walter, nice to have you join us. Walter says, I love Mythic Legions. He says Mythic Customs TV. Thank you very much, Walter. Dustin, nice to have you here. Mike saying Ogre Samurai is awesome. Yeah, he's absolutely so cool. The armor, one thing I love about him is the armor at the waist section there. It actually thickens him. The figure itself, the ogres, like all of their figures, they're so muscle bound. They're actually so fit in that area. And that's the one thing, that is one thing when people ask, what do you wish for this line? I do wish there was a little more body variety. And it's interesting because we've got dwarves and goblins and elves and barbarians and ogres. And trolls. We've got all these different scales, but I'm really looking forward to different body shapes. I've wanted a fat dwarf for a long time, and we're starting to get that. In the Irithyr wave, the armor on the Magnus figure, which was also used on the Vortog, it's a bit of a thicker type build, and I'm excited to see stuff like that. But I love this samurai armor on the ogre because it really thickens up that midsection there, and it just gives it such a brutal look, in my opinion. Steven, nice to have you here, man. If you're not doing so, Steven is one of the 3 hosts of Legions Cast. Make sure you check out Legions Cast. We actually post all of the latest episodes right on the website on sourcehorseman.com. If you go, it's actually right on the homepage of the latest episode. But if you want to catch up on previous ones, if you go right into the top where it says updates, under that drop down, that's where actually the news, the blog, and the podcasts are. Check out some of those. If you enjoy me talking about this here, they don't talk specifically about customs and tips like that, but they just talk about the line. It's great to hear them, Stephen, Travis, and Pete. They have a great time talking about it, and they actually read bios from the characters. They've gone through different factions, read bios, and they talk about characters. If you just like listening to people talk about this line and this universe they've created, that's a great show to check out. So check out Legions Cast for sure. Walter saying, don't forget tomorrow at 5 p.m. there's a new raffle to benefit 2 Cabal members, 25 spots, $20 each, 1 per person. Winner chosen at random will get a new inbox Stone Troll. So thank you very much for whoever donated that Stone Troll to help out. It's a challenging time for a lot of people with what's going on. So really cool to see members of the Cabal pulling together like that. Daniel, thanks for joining. Jeff saying Mythic Legions needs a fat figure. Yeah, like I said, the Magnus is a little bit of a thicker build, but it would be cool to have a bigger figure. I mean, I'm excited. I like the idea of figures that aren't warriors, and I've seen people say oh, we need villagers. I don't want to overcorrect to that level necessarily. I don't want characters that have no visual interest. Just random people. I personally don't really need that, but I am excited for other non-warrior type classic fantasy tropes like bartenders or people that run taverns and inns. These characters keep falling on me here. I'm just going to lay them down for now. I'll fix it all later. Huh. The benefits of live TV, stuff starts falling down, and you're just gonna deal with it. So the last thing that I want to talk about, the last way that you can do some cool series, and I don't have any of them on display because I've shown them quite a few times, is a topic that I talked about a few weeks ago, and that's do a tribute series. So I talked about creating figures that are based on existing pop culture properties. I've done Star Wars Bounty Hunters. I've done G.I. Joe. I mentioned Disney princesses earlier. That's a great way that you can do a series as well because already there are characters within that that pop culture or reference point that you're using. There are already characters that belong together. So you can absolutely do some tribute figures that way and create some series. Obviously, the Motu inspired figures in Mythic Legions, those are kind of a nice little subgroup. Make some of those. Make some characters that don't exist in that line. Actually, that's what I've been doing. I've got a couple cool characters that I haven't shown yet that are totally Masters of the Universe inspired, that are figures they haven't done in the line. Figures that I just think would be cool. Again, I love design challenges, looking at the parts I have available and saying like, hey, how would I create this character? And hopefully I'll get to show some of those soon. But that's definitely an idea that I think you can use as well if you're starting to try to put together some different custom series that you can add to your display. And if you do some of those, if you do some Motu figures, you can just display them with the existing Motu tributes to flesh out that kind of display a little bit. Or if you do something like Vampire Hunters, you can display them with the vampires. Things like that. I think that's a really fun way to approach it. I think that's a really fun way to add some variety to your displays and to challenge yourself as a customizer. One of the things I've said multiple times is the more you do this stuff, the better you're going to get. The more you paint, the more familiar you are going to get with the materials and with the figures themselves and how they take paint and how you paint the different lines on them. Just like the more you paint, the better you'll get at painting. The more you challenge yourself with different design challenges, the more you do these different projects, the better you're going to get. It's going to open up new ways of thinking for yourself that you are then going to be able to utilize to create more customs with. Jeff saying, I wouldn't go full on villages, but innkeeper or smith would be cool. Yeah, I mean, I've made a few blacksmith figures over time, dwarven blacksmiths. They're great. I love doing those. Those are the exact types of figures I would love to see. Non-warriors, but still characters that have a cool, interesting aspect to them. David saying a fat orc cook. I've done an orc cook before. He wasn't fat, but that's a great idea. I would love a fat orc cook. That's super fun. Daniel saying, I'd love to see Dragonborn or Lizard Folk type characters from D&D make their way into Mythic Legions. That would be really, really cool. I'd love to see that. Yeah, Draconians would be dope. Yeah, the dragon like humanoid type figures, those are one that I know that I would love to see. I've seen a bunch of people requesting those as well. Yeah, I like that idea. Court Jester, maybe. Yeah, Court Jester would be cool. I've seen people do a couple different Court Jesters. I did one that wasn't a full-on Jester. It was I wrote a story for him where it was like a Jester reimagined to be more of like an assassin type character. He's actually right behind me. I'll pull him out. So this is a character that I called Jack Motley, and I really like this character. I liked this, and I got the idea to paint the loin with that different kind of Harlequin pattern. I had seen Dennis Derby do that, and I just love the look of it. And really, for me, this figure started with that face there, which it uses a mask from a Lord of the Rings, like Frodo and Goblin disguise type figure. And it comes right out. It's actually, I just sliced it off. So I sliced it apart off the original Lord of the Rings figure. I'm having a hard time getting it off, but I just sliced that mask right off, and it just goes right on this character here. So I took an elf head, and I actually popped an elf head inside of the purple hood from an As a Spirit Bender. I painted his eyes black, and then this mask just goes, it just kind of wedges underneath the edges of that hood and stays nice in place. But this is kind of my take on a court jester type character. He's a little more deadly than your typical jester would be, but he fits the bill for me. Some more comments here. Walter saying, we need a Walter the Mad figure. Comes with a shovel and tacos. I agree. And a beanie hat. Yes, absolutely. A lot of people saying they would buy that. Maybe the Horsemen will take note. Give us a Walter the Mad figure. Jeff saying gnomes that come in a 4-pack. Yeah, gnomes would be really cool. It's interesting. I've talked to the Horsemen before about smaller scale figures because obviously we've got the goblins. But once you go smaller than that, when you start getting to like fairies and pixies and gnomes, that start getting really, really small. And they've said that they absolutely want to do that. It's something they've talked about. And they've actually mentioned maybe having them come in multi-packs. That might be one of the ways they would do it. Obviously, those are just conversations that have been had. There's nothing, I'm not giving you any information. I'm telling you, I'm not giving you a secret. I don't know any of those coming out, but it's something they have mentioned in the past, and I've heard them talk about it outside of just talking to me, that they do like the idea of doing some of those smaller figures. Daniel saying, I'm hoping they do more of the yellow orc vamp hybrids. Yeah, those are called the Ubers, I believe they're called. Like the Evelyn, Malin, that tribute. Yeah, they've said that she's not the only one we're going to see. We're going to see more of them. They've said we're going to see more Fury Clan. They actually at one point said that Fury Clan is not unique to orcs. That Fury Clan is not an orc thing. It's more of a wider ranging. So I've seen people do Fury Clan ogres and Fury Clan goblins. Who knows? Those may all actually come out at some point as official figures. I could see that happening for sure, and that would be really cool. The red is super striking. So that's kind of what I've got for tonight. If there's no additional questions, we can start wrapping this up pretty soon. Talk a little bit about what's coming. And actually, I'm actually pretty excited. I don't usually give a big teaser for what's coming next week, but I am pretty excited because next week's show is episode 10, which that's kind of a cool milestone. Like when I started doing this, I didn't know. When I started doing this, I literally did a little tour back, here because people had wanted to see the collection. And then I really enjoyed the live interaction. So I actually shot a video that I call episode 0. I shot that not here in my collection room, but I shot that in a back room where the workshop is where I do the customs. And at that point, I didn't imagine this being a weekly show, but I really enjoyed it. And the feedback I've been getting from everybody, and quite frankly, the amount of people that have reached out to me and said that not only my customs, but this show and some of the tips and tutorials have helped inspire them to take a crack at it. That is super cool. I was just exchanging, text today with somebody, a gentleman named Timothy, who was showing me some of the work that he's been doing. And for a new customizer, it looked awesome. I mean, I say for a new customizer, it looked awesome. It looked awesome anyway. But the fact that I know that he's just getting into this made it even that much more impressive. So thank you to everyone that shares that stuff. I'm happy to be doing this. I really, really enjoy it. And the fact that we're at episode 10 next week is super cool. That's a milestone. So what we're going to talk about next week is every single week I've been, giving different lessons. I've been talking about painting and talking about using X-Acto blades to slice things apart and talking about using other pieces from other toy lines. While all of those lessons individually I think were important, I did the lessons I did very, very intentionally. A lot of these early episodes, I intentionally lined up the topics leading up to next week, leading up to episode 10, where I want to talk about bringing it all together. I want to show some examples of how all of these different techniques that I've been showing that are individually, none of them are super hard. They're all pretty easy to do, but when you start mastering them and getting, comfortable with them, and you start combining them, how you can create some really, really cool customs that are going to absolutely shine in your collection. So next week, episode 10, that's what we're going to do. We're going to bring it all together. It's going to kind of recap everything that we've talked about leading up to this episode. Really excited to do that. It is a recap episode. It is a kind of, like I said, bringing everything together. Don't read anything into that. It's not the last one by any stretch. There will be an episode 11 and beyond. I still have a lot more stuff to talk about, but I am very excited for next week because I have been leading up to this. And the main custom I'm going to show next week has literally been done for like a month and a half. I've had it ready to go. It's sitting in one of the cases behind me. I've had the photos in Instagram waiting to post next Wednesday in advance of the show. So I'm happy I get to finally show that. A couple more comments here. Let me check those out before we get going. Fury Clan Otho, Walter says. That's funny. Walter saying, hoping my family's doing well. Say hello to my son. Yeah, everyone's doing great. I'm fortunate. I have a job that I can actually work from home. My wife's been working from home as well. So, you know, I'm here in the Northeast. I'm in Rhode Island. It's not too bad up here. Things are a little, I mean, it's definitely unusual. You know, you go to the supermarkets and everything's crazy, but from a health standpoint, things are good. You know, I am going to actually, I think I'm going to go into my office tomorrow just for a change of scenery. I'm now like a week and a half into working from home every single day. So there's not many people working in my office anyway. I think I'm going to go in for a few hours just for kind of a change of scenery. I think that'll be helpful. I also think that my G.I. Joe Snake Eyes figure is at my office waiting for me. So that's my other motivation to go get that Snake Eyes figure, because it's calling my name. I know they shipped early and I ordered it early. I think it's there. Let's see tomorrow. But Walter, thank you for asking. I hope you are doing well, and I hope everyone here is doing well. Let's see. Yeah, Walter, don't forget, watch his Ramblings of a Madman on Sundays. He does it every Sunday. He's in California, so it's kind of Sunday afternoon for me here on the East Coast. It's a little bit earlier for him over there. But check that out as well. That's a lot of fun. I said this a few weeks ago, but it's a great time to be a Mythic Legions collector. Between stuff like Legions Cast and, you know, this show and, you know, Walter's show, there's a lot of cool stuff to watch. And there's been a number of other people that have come on and posted kind of one-off videos. As Walter said before, we encourage you, if you do want to share your thoughts, your collections, your comments, shoot a live video. You don't have to make a show. You don't have to have a setup and, you know, I didn't make this for the show. I made this for the other displays that I do. When I did Legions Con last year, it just happens to work well for the show as well. But you don't have to do any of that stuff, you know. Do a one-off shot, share your collection. There's a lot of fun in that. You know, you'll be surprised how much you will enjoy interacting with people here on the show. Be aware, obviously, that Wednesday nights at 7:30 I do this. Walter does his Sunday mornings. So choose times outside of that, and you're likely to get some viewers and have some nice interactions. With that, I've talked a little bit about next week. For sale Saturday, no big surprise. All week I've been showing my Ghosts of Karamor figures. That's what I'm going to be selling on Saturday. I'm going to do it a little different this week. So one of the things that I like collectors getting my pieces in their collection. That makes me happy when I see them post on the Cabal that they got a package in and it's got a Mythic Customs figure in it. It makes me really happy. I enjoy that very much. Obviously, I'm not a factory. I'm not pumping these things out. I'm making them by hand one at a time. So I sell one a week. But occasionally, I do get a little aggressive, a little ambitious, I should say, and I sell more than one. So this coming Saturday, I will have a total of 6 Ghosts of Karamor figures for sale. The ones that I'm posting all week, those are my own display pieces. But the ones that I'm going to be selling this coming weekend, this coming Saturday, a lot of them are variations of ones I'm showing this week. So if you see one you like, there's a pretty good chance I'm going to have it for sale on Saturday. What I'm going to do is a little different, though. I always post at 10 o'clock Eastern time. the figure I have available. I have had some people say, oh, I wish you would push it back a little bit so people on the West Coast would have more of a chance. Look, the bottom line is there's no good time to post these things. No matter when I post it, I'm going to alienate somebody. What I'm going to do this week, though, is instead of posting all 6 of them available at 10 o'clock, I'm going to post 1 figure per hour for starting at 10 o'clock, and I'm going to post 1 in the 10 o'clock hour, 1 in the 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, and so forth. I'd like to say I'm going to do it at the top of every hour, but I'm committing myself to doing this for 6 hours on Saturday. There is a chance that I may be doing something at the top of the hour and something may be a little bit delayed. But I will try to do it as close to top of the hour as possible. I've got one of them right here. This is the King figure that I showed, King Diagon. He will be one of the ones that's going up for sale. And one of the cool things is if you looked at the pictures, I showed you my displays. There's extras in all of these. All of the figures that I'm going to be selling on Saturday have some cool features. They have some extra heads that I will show on Saturday when I sell them, but I haven't shown them yet. So there's going to be some cool surprises there. There's also going to be a couple of figures that I'm not going to show during the week that I only made specifically for the sale. So if you're enjoying the Ghost figures, check it out on Saturday. There will be a bunch of these available. Hopefully some new collectors will be able to grab some and add some pieces to their collection. You never know how fast things go. I have some figures that sell out literally seconds after I post it. I have others that take a lot longer. This particular figure here, this is my Iranese demon. Got a very Gorgo look. He's got an extra head in there as well, but I also painted up it actually uses a Gorgo body with a torso and loin piece from a scapular figure. I loved that red combination. And he's got a pair of red wings in there. He's got an unhelmeted head, but I also painted up a Gorgo style head because I knew that would be really attractive. This was what I posted this past Saturday, and it's still available. So you never know. Sometimes things sell like that. Other times they hang around for a while. But if you're interested in the Ghosts, check it out on Saturday. I'll have a whole bunch of them available throughout the day. Hopefully, if you're interested in one, you can add one to your collection. And with that, I think that it's going to be time to sign off for tonight. Thank you again to everyone for joining Mythic Conversations. I will be here next week, as Drew likes to say. Same Mythic time, same Mythic channel. He already put it in there, so I'm not stealing his thunder this week. He already got to it. After the show, as always, I will repost pictures of everything we've seen today, so you can take a look at it. And with that, thank you all. See you next week for episode 10. Check you out then. Night, everybody.